So our guest today is very involved in the discussion of when and how to reopen movie theaters. He is the executive director of the Chatham Orpheum Theater, and when it's open, he is my boss. Kevin McLain, welcome to Modern Times.
How you doing, Rowan?
So let's just start, before we start off with what's going on right now, let's rewind the clock a little bit. Let's go all the way back to March. So
Yeah.
when did you first get an idea of the scope of what was happening, and you knew you would have to close the theater? Like, when did you first get, I guess, like alarm bells?
Yeah, it was that week. It was the week we closed. We decided on that Friday that we were not going to reopen. I think it was March 13th. It was that week. Everything had started building. You start seeing stuff in the media. You start seeing, the forces were starting to come together, and people were starting to get nervous. And the week of the 13th of March, that week we just saw a dramatic downturn in attendance. I mean, we went from, having an average, kind of week the week before to a fraction of the business. And so, every day that week, Jeff and Sarah and I would sit there, and it was dead and nobody was coming in. You might have one or two people in the theater. You might have one or two people in the restaurant every day. We had more employees sitting around there than we had customers. And, we weren't even making enough to pay the staff to be there. So to me, that was a huge indicator of the awareness of the community, and, given our community, the age of our community, and the fact that, people in our town are smart. They're not dumb. They see the newspaper, they're watching the news, they see what's going on. And I think they're reasonable and cautious people. And so I took my cue, quite honestly, from the community. It became very obvious to me, as the week went on and business just went down, 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 that the community was telling me, we're done. This virus is, we don't even know at that point what's going on. You don't even know the scope of it, but yet the community understood, and they saw the bigger picture, and they kind of made the decision for us by not showing up. And so it became, so what I was waiting for, quite honestly, is on that Friday, Monomoy was going to make an announcement as to whether or not they were going to open schools on Monday, because they had gotten to that point. And so I remember that on Thursday, I said to Sarah and Jeff, and I said, if Monomoy schools says they're not opening on Monday, that's it. We're done. If it's not safe to send kids to school, it's not safe for our audience to come to a movie theater. We're done. To me, closing the school gave an impetus, and it gave a rationalization, if you needed one, for businesses to be like, you know what, we're done. At least temporarily. And then what happened on Friday? They didn't. They were like, well, I think we're going to be open on Monday. We're still going to keep going. And I just looked at Sarah and Jeff, and we all just kind of looked at each other and went like, yeah, no, I don't think that's smart. It just didn't feel right. And, you couple with common sense, that feeling you get like, that just doesn't seem right, along with community basically saying, we're not coming. We're taking this seriously. We're not coming. So we made the call on Friday, and we were the first business in town to shut down. And then by Sunday, I think, or by Monday, a lot of businesses in Chatham had already decided to shut down at that point, and the school didn't reopen on Monday after all. So I think, to me, it was an inevitable decision. I was disappointed they didn't make the decision on Friday. I was waiting for that so that we could say, yes, we're not going to reopen as well, almost in support of that decision. But when they didn't, it was like, you know what? No. My responsibility is to the community and to the safety and well-being of the community. And, the idea that we would just stay open to make a couple bucks, and endanger our community of older people. We had a prime audience, that's in that danger zone. And so it just became, a no-brainer for me. So we decided to shut down and, you know, decided to deal with the backlash at that point. But quite honestly, we never got any backlash. People understood. Our audience understood.
Yeah, yeah. And
Because they weren't coming anyway.
yeah. Well, so unlike a lot of other theaters, the Orpheum was able to open their cafe, right? For a little while for some curbside pickup.
Yeah, well, what happened is basically, you know, when we shut down, we thought we were going to be shut down for a month. You know, again, nobody had any idea. I think everybody thought there would be a coordinated effort from the top. I think everybody thought, you know, we would, you know, as a country take care of this like we did Ebola, like we do. And that never happened. And the whole thing just fell apart. So originally we thought we were going to be open. We were going to be just shut for a month. So that's what the plan was. And then it became very quickly, it became obvious that this was going to go on for a little bit longer. So I think it was in April. So immediately, you know, we started looking into the PPP. We started, you know, because I'm all of a sudden now working out of, you know, my house. And, you know, so because we thought we were only going to be shut for a month, we still kept paying some of the core staff. Because my feeling was, well, if we're going to reopen in a month, we're going to need Jeff back, we're going to need Sarah back, we're going to need Zach back. You know, we're going to need a core group of people to kind of reopen the restaurant and to reopen. So we kept paying after we were closed some of the staff so that if we could reopen in a month, we had the staff to reopen, and then we just bring everybody back. And then it became very clear that that wasn't going to happen. We then were able to secure PPP funding. And right around the time that happened, it was around the time when, you know, in the town of Chatham, there wasn't a lot of food options. Nobody knew, you know, everybody, the virus was still new, you know, there was still a lot of misunderstanding about what was going on. So all the restaurants were shut down. And that was when restaurants were just starting to be able to do takeout. And Sarah and Zach and Eric came to me and said, you know, we would be really interested in, you know, using the sub shop space and doing takeout family style, because there's not a lot of food options in Chatham. And, you know, you can only eat pizza so many nights a week, you know what I mean? So as almost not a service, but almost as like a service to the community, let's do a takeout family style and, you know, help kind of fill a need, because there wasn't, you know, most restaurants weren't open for takeout at that point. So we did open for a few months and it went very well. They did a great job. People loved the food. People were very appreciative that, you know, that we did that and that, you know, we provided an alternative to what was already out there and things of that nature. And then what ended up happening is when the PPP ran out, you know, we did a financial analysis of, you know, and that was probably, I want to say in June. So at the end of May, beginning of June, we started looking at, you know, the PPP is going to run out in a few weeks. You know, can we afford to keep doing that? And, you know, should we keep doing that? And so there was a couple issues there. One of them was there's no way we could make money without the PPP, having the staff in the kitchen serving the food. We would have lost like $9,000 a month just trying to do that, what we had been doing. And then the other thing is we're a nonprofit community theater. Our job and our role in the community isn't to compete with other businesses trying to survive. And so, you know, by the beginning of June, most of the restaurants in Chatham had figured out how to open part-time. You know, you had the corner store, the Squire, everybody was open, at least for takeout. And so at that point, it was like, well, there's no point in the theater losing money. You know, we're a nonprofit, losing money to compete against struggling for-profit restaurants who are already having problems. So there was a couple reasons why we stopped. Financially, we stopped because it didn't make sense. But then moreover, from a mission statement as the role of the community theater in the community, it's not to compete and take away business from our neighbors. Lily's Diner just opened up in the middle of all this. Our job isn't to take business away from her as the community theater. Our job is to support other businesses when we can. So at a certain point, it kind of felt like we were competing with these other businesses, and I didn't feel that that was right. I don't feel like that's our role. When we're open and when we're showing movies and we're serving, that's one thing. But when your business is closed and the only reason you're open is to sell food out the back door, now you're a business competing with other restaurants. And that didn't feel to me like the right thing that the theater as a community nonprofit theater should be doing. So we decided to stop at that point in doing it. But I think it was a great asset to the community. They did a great job of it, and people really appreciated that there was another alternative option at a point in town when there were very few options to eat, that we were able to step up and kind of fill a void and a need in the community. And then, later on kind of pulled back when there was plenty of other options around us. And, again, our role isn't to compete with, the Squire. Our role isn't to compete with, Bluefins. So I don't want to take business away from them, especially in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, come on. So I think it's important to understand your role as a community theater, and to make these decisions consciously and purposefully.
Yeah. So, fast forward a few months to, August, things are, depending, like the country's all over the place. The world's all over the place. Some places are great. Some places are so-so. Some places are still pretty bad. And so, as you mentioned before, our community is very smart, because we're mainly composed of like an older demographic, especially during the
I've said this about our community. I love our audience. I love our community. That's one of the things I love about running this theater is that, we have the best community. They're smart. They're very well educated. They're wealthy, which helps as a nonprofit, and they're very world traveled. And when you combine people who are intellectual, who are smart, who travel the world, who have big world visions, from a community theater perspective, it gives you a much wider berth of opportunity to present cultural art and different types of informational and films, because they're curious and they're interested in a lot of different things. So for running a community theater, they're a perfect audience. They're the best. So you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So some major theater chains, they're reopening or like around this time, last week and this week, and I'm sure we'll see a lot more in the next month. But the Orpheum, as you mentioned, a nonprofit small town theater. Do you think what would it take for the Orpheum and theaters like it to reopen? And do you think it's possible while the pandemic is happening?
Well, I think for us, you have to look at there's layers of issues here. You know what I mean? There's layers upon layers upon layers of issues that all the theaters have to go through. And I think for me, I sit in on we're part of the House Convergence, which is the largest independent theater kind of group in the country. We meet every year right before Sundance out in Utah. And so we've all kind of stayed together and we communicate together. One of the things that we found is that most first-run theaters are trying to reopen. I think you see a lot of first-run theaters and for-profit theaters trying to reopen, and in different towns. Now, in some communities, we're finding that down in Pennsylvania and some of these other areas, a lot of areas, that they're kind of being pushed into reopening, even though they don't want to, because of the demographic makeup of the community they are in. Some people, this becomes kind of politicized. So you find in certain areas, there's more of a push that's being kind of the drumbeat to reopen no matter what. And so I think you see a lot of these theater chains, responding to that in a lot of these little areas. We're finding with art house theaters, independent theaters, non-first run theaters, most of them are just planning on staying closed until basically it's really safe to reopen. And, you know, that's, what does that mean? You know, that's an ongoing question. And at the moment, nobody really knows. I mean, in theory, you know, for us, because the lobby is so small, because the restaurant space is so small, the bathrooms, you know, everything within a historical community theater like ours is very tiny. So how do you do social distancing? I mean, it's virtually impossible. So that was one of the issues for us. For us, it kind of feels like, from opening just as a general rule, you know, it's going to be very difficult while there's social distancing. As long as that is an element, you really can't open. And if you really can't open, and you can only open in a small fractional way, the problem with that is that, A, you're opening knowing you're going to lose even more money than you did before, because the costs of opening, even for 25 people in the main theater, are way more than opening for a full theater. So like an example is with social distancing, even with 25 people in the main theater and 8 people in the small theater, which is the maximum you could have, still need over 7 staff members just to manage that. So now you work there, you know, on the busiest nights when we're doing Avengers, we have maybe 4. And those are nights we're making thousands and thousands of dollars. We're servicing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on a daily basis. 4 people. Now you need 7, because you have to have someone standing up to the bathrooms, because only one person can be in the bathroom at a time. You have to control every aspect of someone's experience. We have to have ushers. There has to be someone sitting in the theater during the entire movie to remind people to sit back down, to put your mask on. So imagine, you work there, you know, imagine opening under those conditions. You know, I think part of, for us, the reason people love the theater is because of the experience that we provide. You know, it's that experience of a true community theater. You come together, it's a shared experience. You get a drink at the bar, you see a friend, you sit and you chat. All of that is gone. And now all of a sudden you're in a sterile environment. Oh, I can't get a drink. Oh, I have to wear a mask. Oh, I can't sit in the seat I want to sit at. Everything becomes a negative. And all of a sudden it's like, well, what business is this? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? You know, all you're going to do is upset people and take away the experience, is what made you good in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then, God forbid, you make someone sick and you have to shut back down. So all people are going to remember now from you is, well, last time I was there, I couldn't get a drink. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I had to sit in the seat. I didn't, you know what I'm saying? It becomes a negative experience. And so it's a balance. You have to, it's very touchy. You have to do that balance, because you have to, when you reopen, you still have to create the same experience. Otherwise it defeats the point of opening. The point of opening isn't just so you can sit in a dark room and watch a movie. That's not the point. The point is the experience overall, and especially with our community. And again, I say this not as a rule for all theaters. I say this as very specific and reflective of our community and why our community supports our theater and why. And I think as someone who's worked there for what, almost 4 years now, yeah, you know, you understand that. You know, yeah. I think you understand how the interaction with the community and our role in it. And it's not just about the movies. Yeah. It's about being a place for people to gather and to be able to experience things together, whether it's an event, just a cup of coffee. You know, people, you know, it's a long, cold winter here in Chatham, and you know as well as I do, you know, a lot, you know, we're open every day, and people love just to come in and say hi to us. Yeah. You know, a lot of our people in our community are older; they live alone, so you know, we're a resource within the community, and so if you can't open under that kind of purpose, then what's the purpose of opening? just to say you're open and to lose more money. And then when you go out and try to raise money, how do I justify that?
Yeah.
I just don't know, and it's tough. So, obviously we've had a lot of time to sit around and think about these things.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So,
because
yeah. I mean, there's really no way to go to a movie theater these days without putting yourself at risk. Like, there's no way to be completely and totally safe. Even if people are wearing their masks throughout the whole movie. What if they get popcorn? What if they get drinks? They're gonna have to take off their mask. Even if it's just for a few seconds. It like.
Right.
So
I noticed that. And I noticed that a number of theaters aren't even opening the concession stands. So it's like, okay, let me get this straight. You're going to shut down the only profitable part of this entire business.
Yeah.
So again, I get it. Everybody, I run into people every time I go to the grocery store. When is the theater coming back? Everybody wants it to come back, but they want it to come back the way it was. They want the same experience they had. What they're saying is, we want the theater back, but they're not saying we want it back under any circumstance, because it became, again, going back to March, the audience left us. The audience decided this isn't safe for us as a community to do this anymore. And so we just respect that. And I think for me, I have to respect that. And I don't know how in good conscience I could open a community theater to the community unless I am very certain that there is minimal to no risk to my community. I mean, it defeats the entire point of being a community theater if you make your community sick. So, again, it doesn't make much sense. So it's a tough question and a tough road to hoe. I think what a lot of theaters are doing, what some theaters are doing, which I think is really smart. Some theaters are, because they have more screens, and they have, even independent theaters, they have more screens, and the theaters are bigger than ours, and they have more screens. They're able to do private theater rentals. So, like I know some theaters are doing, hey, your family can come and rent the theater and do that, and show whatever you want, and then you can have that experience. So some theaters are moving in that direction, which I think makes sense for some theaters to do if you can do it. If you have 6 screens and you can rent out, like birthday parties, theater rentals, for families and for pods of groups of people who don't have to necessarily socially distance, you can make some money that way. More power to you. So everybody's trying to figure out what works for them. And so that's, there isn't a one fit solution in all of this.
Yeah. So this next question is a hypothetical. So imagine a theater, movie theater could be any size. The auditoriums could be any possible size. Do you think there's any possible way it could be completely and totally safe to go and see a movie in like a normal movie theater, like while everything that's happening is going on?
I think I've heard from a lot of medical experts, you hear, and I think this is the reality of the situation. Mm-hmm. You can do everything right. You can follow every protocol properly, and everybody can do everything right, and you can still have an infection, and you can still have an outbreak. And I think at the end of the day, I think everything is a risk, and it's a mitigation as far as what the risk factors are. But I don't know. I think the schools are going to be an interesting test moving forward. And I think we're going to have to see when theaters open like AMC and Regal when they start opening, because they're the people who can put the most money, the most resources into providing that safe experience. They can spend thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on, all this equipment to make it safe. So fortunately, we can use them as kind of a canary in a coal mine to see how that works. The problem is we don't know enough really about the virus still. I mean, and what we do know is that when you put a number of people in an environment, in an enclosed environment with recirculated air for a length of time, the possibility of of a thing goes way up. So unfortunately, theaters are, I mean, the absolute worst environment in a way that you could be in. You're in an enclosed room, and I mean, theaters are sealed for air. I mean, they're sealed. It's not like, there's no windows. I mean, it's a sealed environment. We're looking at putting in UV lights into our air conditioning systems. Fortunately for our theater, all of the air conditioning systems for the main floor, for the restaurant, for the theaters, all come from pull outside air in. Fortunately, our theater has been renovated recently, and we can update it. But it'll be interesting to see. I don't know the answer to that, and I think you find that until theaters really start to open in earnest and people start going in earnest, you'll start to see whether or not that's going to work. I think if people followed protocol, if people wore the masks, if people, were conscientious about it, and were respectful about all of it, I think you could. Again, you could only have a maximum of 25, in a theater. You could only have 8 for us in the small theater with the size. So yeah, in theory, but I guess the wild card in all this really is when you have so many people together in a windowless or airless environment with recycled air. I think the tests that have been done, it's difficult. It's really hard, and especially if people don't follow the protocols. I mean, there was this one video this one theater company did. I don't know if it was a chair company or because they're one chair company's coming out. They think they've come up with a surface that the theater chairs. They've created this surface that will resist the virus for up to 7 days. So everybody's coming up with new ways in doing these things. But one person without a mask in a theater coughing, that just gets circulated around. And unless you have all the protocols in place. So I don't know. I'm honestly, I'm glad I don't have to be one of the first people to figure that out and to use our audience as kind of a test case. Our audience in our community is not the people to figure this out on. And so we're going to have to wait and see how that goes. And I think, the industry will figure it out. As long as there's money to be made, they'll figure it out. As long as there's profit down the road in reopening, they will make the adjustments. They will figure it out. I mean, we'll figure out how to make this safe. But I think, unfortunately, at the moment, it's still an ongoing question of how exactly to do that.
Yeah. So taking it as it comes, that's the name of the game for now, right?
Yeah, that's kind of taking it as it comes. When we kind of put together a budget and a concept for being closed for up to a year. I think the board our board, we sat down with I sat down with the board and, Jeffrey Jacobs, who's our film buyer. And, just in looking at the landscape, you have to kind of look at, all right, well, during all of this kind of crisis period, what is the most important thing? And for me, the most important thing is being able to preserve the theater so that when this is over, we're still here and we can reopen and we can still be the service and the theater to the community that we were. So for me, I go into preservation mode. I go into the mode of, making sure we're still here in a year. That's more important than trying to reopen at all costs.
Yeah.
And so, the board, we put together a year-long budget. And, with the potential of, with completely not knowing what's going to happen, of being closed for maybe up to a year. Because you just don't know. Now, no one hopes that, no one wants that.
Yeah.
That's not on anybody's plan. But you have to look at the worst case scenario and plan for that, so that when we can reopen, we can. And it's not like, well, we blew all of our money trying to be open, and now that we can be open, we have no money, and it's just. That to me is where we're at. And we look at this on a monthly basis. We talk about it every week. I'm still working every day. So we're still ongoingly every week, every day, every month. I mean, we are still actively, working on programming. We're still looking at what we're going to do when we reopen. We're still making plans. So, for me, the biggest message to take away from all of this is that, your community theater is still going to be here when this is over, even if it takes a year. We're very fortunate that, we have a very good fundraising. We have an endowment. The board has been always very forward thinking in paying down our debt and setting up an endowment for just this. We didn't bring this theater back and raise all this money and do all of this just to not be prepared and just to be like, oh, well, pandemic, we're out of business now. That's not why we did this. We built this theater, we brought it back, so it's going to be here for 100 years, not for 7. And so, the board has done a great job in being very proactive and forward thinking and setting up the endowment and stuff. So, we can survive. We still have to actively fundraise. We're still deciding how we're going to move forward. Because you have to read the tea leaves and read the industry. The industry's changing every day, so you kind of have to look at, well, how does that affect us?
Yeah.
What's in our best interest? Studios don't care about us. Studios could care less if we reopened or not. It's not going to make a bit of difference in their lives. So, everybody has to, I think all the theaters have to really kind of reevaluate, who they are. And for us, 7 years, it's been a nonstop 7 years. We opened, it was just boom, lines out the door. And, when you're in the middle of that 24/7 hamster wheel, 7 years on, you don't always have a lot of time to sit and just kind of contemplate what you're doing and why you're doing it and if it's working sometimes. Because on a daily basis, you're reacting. You're constantly opening and reacting, and that you kind of get into that routine. So, since we've closed in March, we've all had a lot of time to sit and to think and to say, we have been very successful and this has been great, but, what could we do better? What have we done that's worked, and what can we do better? And, when we reopen, are we reopening the exact same way? Are we going to change the way we open or we reopen? These are all things that, I think ongoingly you have to evaluate on a monthly basis, and have ongoing conversations about these things, because the industry is changing nonstop. every week, new rules and regulations come out. So it's hard for anybody to say, yes, this is what we're going to do, because what is true today may not be true in 3 or 4 months when you reopen. So, you know, it's not like you can just blindly say, okay, well, when we can reopen, we'll just reopen like we were. You know, you can't just say that. You really have to look at the studio situation. You have to look at all these aspects and kind of really figure out what's in the best interest for your theater and your community and how that works. And so that's what we're doing. You know, we sit around and we think a lot about these things.
Yeah. Well, Kevin McLain, thank you very much for joining me. And
hey, my pleasure.
Yeah, you know, best wishes to the Orpheum. I mean, you know, that's dependent on, I mean, I'm dependent on that too. So
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you know, it's, everybody misses it. You know, we all love it. We all miss it. We all want it back. My job is to make sure that it's here when we are ready to come back.
Yeah.
And that, you know, when we reopen, we are still, it may not be exactly the same way, you know, because of the industry, but we will still be the same community theater. We will still be, you know, you will still be able to have the same experience. And I think in this time in everyone's life when everything is in chaos and literally on a week to week and sometimes day to day basis, norms and things that we've come to rely on in our lives are just kind of fading away and everything's changing. I think it's good to know that, you know, when all this is over, your theater's still going to be here. And that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm still working every day to make sure that, you know, when this is over, the theater's still going to be here. And I think that's one thing, if, you know, we want to communicate anything to the community, is that we're still here and we're still producing. We're still producing stuff on our website. We're going virtual. We're creating in September, a virtual screening room, and we're going to be screening new movies. We're going to be, you know, we're still doing local artist of the month. You know, Jeff and I are still actively creating programming. And, you know, with the anticipation that when we reopen, all of this will come back into the theater. So, you know, we're still here and we're still going to be here when we reopen. So that's the deal.